Hello everyone, welcome to TEDxSaintFrancisHS 2023. We are so excited to have all of you here with us today. To start up tonight's event, please welcome Ms. Wilson-Friedsam to the stage to lead us in an opening prayer.
Hello, St. Francis. It's a great day to be a Lancer. Ground yourselves today, root your feet flat on the floor. Sit up tall. Imagine not being in the audience, but perhaps getting ready to give a talk. Take a deep breath and find yourself grounded in the presence of God. Loving and gracious God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather today as a community to celebrate the voices of our students. We are grateful you have given them the power and the strength to share their stories, and that you have endowed us with the capacity to hear them. We ask that you watch over our speakers and crew members who have worked tirelessly to make this evening possible, and that you give us the capacity to listen deeply and fully to the words we're about to hear. May our experience this evening inspire us to likewise use our voices to bring hope to our world. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. It's my pleasure just to speak to you a little bit about the exemplar that TEDx St. Francis is. In March of 2020, Mrs. Shortle, who runs this program, and I were going to give some professional development on meaningful assessment. And she was going to give a TED Talk on the importance of TEDx and how it's changed her teaching, because it is the model for student leadership and for real engagement and ownership. Everything you see here tonight is student-led and designed and directed. And that takes place over the course of months, and it is a real authentic model for leadership on our campus. And when we start to reflect about other programs, we really think about TEDx first as how we move forward. And part of that leadership is not only in the details of the event itself, in the marketing, in the tech setup, in the mentorship students give each other on the talks, and the ways that they support each other, which is real and genuine, but it is the vulnerability in leadership and being able to share a story with this community and globally. And vulnerability in leadership is more important now than ever. At St. Francis, leaders inspire leaders, and we are constantly inspired by our students, and especially in this moment, and we're so excited to share it with you tonight. So let's please give a warm round of applause for our co-directors who are going to kick this off.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to our 2023 TEDx St. Francis High School event. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson-Friedsam, for leading our opening prayer. My name is Claire Lua, and I'm here with my fellow seniors and co-directors, Arhana Atharish and Andrew Adkisson. We are thrilled for you all to hear the inspiring and unique stories of 13 student speakers tonight. At the core, we here at TEDx St. Francis High School seek to empower student voices. With the support of our moderator, Mrs. Shortle, as well as many others along the way, we are proud to be a student-run program. What we share with you tonight is the product of our efforts throughout the past several months leading up to today. We started with constructing our club board a little under a year ago, and then selected our speakers in the fall. From speaker workshops to lobby decorating to late night tech rehearsals, we and the TEDx St. Francis High School team have cherished the opportunity to guide speakers and put together all the moving pieces of this event.
Starting as SF Talks in 2017, our program has officially been TEDx certified for the past 4 years, with the X meaning our own individual and independently organized event. We're only a small part of the bigger TED organization, along with the summits, other high school programs, and conferences around the world. The mission of TED is to spread ideas, foster community, and create impact. So tonight, our 13 student speakers on this platform of storytelling will do just that. Their experiences and perspectives will spark our own curiosity, help us contemplate ideas we wouldn't have thought of, and drive us to be problem solvers in this world of uncertainty. All of our speakers are sharing their personal, vulnerable, and authentic selves, so learn from their experiences, be inspired, and engage with their ideas.
Everything you see tonight is the culmination of hours and hours of work from our incredible board. This group, comprised entirely of students, of course, is what makes all of this happen. We would like to thank our featured director, Olivia Vinkier, speaker directors Alexander Chang and Tricia Menon, speaker assistants Ritika Aurora, Annika Baston, Nitish Gurushetty, Nithya Kupareddy, and Marissa Lewetson, publicity director Elsa Yang, publicity assistant Sean Reynolds, hospitality director Andrew Carrasquillo, hospitality assistant Tenley Flahaven, tech and crew director Divya Murthy, tech and crew assistant Anna Fazioli, media manager Grace Coyle, AV Molly Chopra, and our photographers Gabby Dominguez and Paige Allen. I would also like to thank my sister Aishani Apresh, who founded SF Talks and TEDx 7 years ago. Our publicity director, Senior Elsa Yang, created this year's logo. She says, "The X is comprised of hand-drawn doodles that correspond to the elements of our 13 different talks. It represents how the stories, experiences, and ideas of our students culminate into TEDxSaintFrancisHS. We would also like to take a moment to thank our amazing moderator, Mrs. Leslie Shortle, who's been with us every step of the way.
Before we continue on in our program tonight, we would like to give a few brief reminders. Please remember that there is no food or drink allowed in the pack. We will have light refreshments that you can enjoy outside or in the lobby. If this is your first time here in the pack, the main exit, which connects to the lobby, is through the door on your right. There are also 2 emergency exits behind you and to your left. Tonight's event will be structured into 4 blocks, with each one featuring 3 to 4 student speakers. The detailed speaker order can be found in your programs.
We will have 3 short breaks between our 4 blocks this evening for you to stretch your legs, have a snack outside, and write notes to speakers. And also feel free to check us out on our social media Instagram page at TEDxSaintFrancisHS.
We also have a new opportunity to engage with speakers and their ideas this year. In the brand new Innovation Center are 3 glass rooms. Rooms with 3 glass walls that are always open for student use. We've set up an idea wall with guiding questions about each speaker's talk to provide background to anyone who walks in. Any person on campus, teachers, students, parents, can use string to physically connect ideas between the talks who they think speak to each other and offer complementary meaning. To contribute their own ideas, they can attach note cards and write their own original ideas based on the speaker's ideas, answers to the guiding questions, and even shared experiences. At the center of all of our work is engaging the broader community with our speakers' authentic ideas and experiences. And we hope you can visit the glass room after the event to further reflect on all you hear tonight. This year's art, titled Higher Crimes of the Future, was created by former speaker and board member, Senior Matthew Tran. Matthew was drawn to elements of the human experience that are presented in each speaker's talk. Enriched by the directorial films of David Cronenberg and Oliver Stone, he wanted to put a twist on humans' eventual evolution into androids in his artwork. He quotes, "We are addicted to replicating feelings of euphoria and become the android without any real moral conscience. To avoid this, it should dawn on us to listen to how the speakers sustain their sense of humanity without the portrayed exploitation of resources, through mediums like online chess and the car radio."
Now, each of us here in this room is on our own unique life journey, with different speeds, directions, and destinations. For example, we may find ourselves hiking or playing a sport. Or we can find ourselves on journeys exploring various parts of our personal and cultural identities. These experiences shape our unique values and worldviews, from the nuances of how we look at everyday happenings to the moments and people that we treasure the most. With this in mind, I like to think of this space as a colorful mosaic of voices. Each of us is on our own journey, but that doesn't mean that we have to go through it alone. In fact, it's all the more reason to foster conversations.
With each of our distinct experiences, emotions, and perspectives, our nuances are what makes us unique and extraordinary. When we share our experiences that build emotion and shape perspective, we can help others understand the world in ways they may not have considered. And when we listen to others, we also broaden our own understanding of the world and the people in it. Storytelling helps us develop our empathy, and it brings us together. We may not always agree with someone's ideas, but we can always learn from it.
We are naturally drawn to community to help reconcile our own struggles. Whether it be finding a group of people to play chess with, opening up to others to eliminate shame, or focusing on nature and joining a month-long backpacking trip to overcome the disconnect technology can create. We find ourselves relying on other people and our passions to conceive our sense of self in this world. This resilience, which often surprises us, is what helps us find these little pockets of joy in people, hobbies, and more. Through our relationships with others and our fervor for the things we love, we learn to communicate with ourselves and the world and articulate our often nebulous feelings. For example, driving can be a tool to increase mindfulness, and understanding how other people perceive the world can help us appreciate the little things in life. Laughing can help us bond with others, and we own our individual identity. However, arriving at these truths takes self-reflection, time to be intentional, and understanding our own values. Our inner strength can't be directed and channeled into something productive without the guiding arrow of our value system. So, as you listen to the talks, consider, what matters to you? How can you lean on other people and engage in conversation to determine your own truths? To help start this journey, please welcome Speaker Director Senior Tricia Menon to the stage to introduce our first speaker of the evening. Thank you.
Hi everyone. As our lovely directors just mentioned, my name is Tricia Menon, and I've had the honor and privilege of being one of the directors of speakers this year. One of my main responsibilities as a speaker director included working with a lot of the speakers you will be hearing from tonight, including our first speaker, who will talk about her experiences on living without technology. Now, taking a break from technology can be seen as doing different things, from putting a screen time on our phones to physically putting it in another room. For our first speaker, immersing herself in nature and seeing the beauty it had to offer was how she took a break. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage our very first speaker of the evening, Junior Haley Harris.
If I told you I would pay you $500 to throw your phone into the middle of the ocean right now, would you do it? 1,000? 10,000? All your pictures, texts, emails, and files are gone in the blink of an eye. What if the proposal changed, though, to going just a simple week? No phone. Some adults may be inclined for the cash reward, but most teenagers living in the age of technology wouldn't jump too quickly at the offer. My parents started sending me to summer camp when I was just 6 years old. It began as 2 weeks in the sunny Sierras, yet my love for camp was so explosive, to the point that I was going for up to 5 weeks at a time. But there's a catch. No phone, no laptop, and no technology for what most people would think is an excruciating amount of time. Imagine this: the Taylor Allison Swift, 12-time Grammy-winning, Ticketmaster-shattering artist, comes back from her 5th year off the grid. She surprise drops her latest album, and you can't even listen to it for 5 long weeks. The truth is, this whole no technology deal started as a minor detail because, as a 6-year-old, I had little idea as to what technology even was. But as I got older and older, spent more and more time at camp each year, I became increasingly aware of what it meant to ditch all forms of it. Society told me it should be unbearable, but I couldn't help but feel overjoyed to go back each year. After watching my friends drown in the whirlpool of social media, I realized how light and free I felt in the Sierras. Contrary to some popular belief, that wasn't attributed to amazing activities like wake surfing, rock climbing, or horseback riding, but something much deeper. I connected so well with camp because it was my first insight into relationships which developed entirely from face-to-face connection. One of my most transformative experiences took place this past summer on a 2-week backpacking trip in the Sierra National Forest. I was accompanied by 13 other high schoolers and 2 counselors, some of whom I was meeting for the first time. So yes, my anxiety was at an all-time high when I realized I would be spending the next 8 days in the middle of the woods with some complete strangers. Shockingly, the amount of hours in a day opens up tremendously when there is quite literally nothing else to do but hike and talk. Very quickly on the trail, I felt as though some of these people were the ones who knew me best in the whole world. Without our phones in the way of conversation, we dissected family relationships, talked about our views on faith, and shared humorous stories from all of our different walks of life. Most importantly, we dreamt of the future, which at the time included a real bed, hot shower, and far fewer mosquitoes. Besides just telling stories, we learned how to support each other, how to communicate, and how to solve problems as a group while still being uncomfortable with one another. Hiking up a cliff in the California sun with a 40-pound backpack is no easy task. But you know what's even harder? Having to ask the whole group to stop because you need a break. Everyone wants to put their best foot forward when meeting new peers. But nature makes our ego take a back seat and lean on one another instead. We very quickly learned who can stretch out a leg cramp the best, who can actually season food, and who has the ability to tell left from right on a map. In a lot of ways, nature forced us to work as one. Frankly, there really was no other option. But that's the point. That when taking technology out of the equation, the importance of these face-to-face connections rose to the surface and led us to our destination in one piece, mostly. Consequently, camp led to the development of my self-confidence. For 11 months each year, I scrolled through social media, watching makeup tutorials and seeing the latest hack for losing 5 pounds on my stomach. But for that one precious month at camp, I lived with 10 other girls my age, and not once did we find ourselves wishing we looked any different. Remember that backpacking trip with no phone? I also did it with no deodorant. Yeah, bears can smell it too. You see this view right here? This was my bathroom for 8 days. And I was okay with it because I was having the time of my life. I came to the simple conclusion, I am more beautiful when I'm having fun. I couldn't obsessively look in a mirror or check my phone camera to see how I looked, but if you were wondering, this is what I looked like for a majority of the trip. after repeatedly falling down every hillside. My looks were probably the least of my concerns, though. We were more worried about making it up that mountain pass than the dirt on our knees and faces. You have to pick and choose a lot of battles in life, and I chose to find comfort in my own skin, rather than trying to fight it. Being an Earth's beauty truly helped me appreciate my own, both inside and out. Nature opened my eyes to a bigger world, one that pushed me outside of my comfort zone. I began to understand that everything I was stressed about before, how I looked, seemed, and acted, mattered a whole lot less. I mean, looking at this view, it seems silly to stress about that AP test score, or that the precious curls in my hair fall out of perfection. Standing on top of these huge mountains overlooking all of these views, everything seemed so small. From swimming in a snow-melted lake to dancing in a meadow, I realized how minuscule, unnecessary stresses were in the grand scheme of things. All of these revelations didn't just happen overnight, though. Rather, years and years of learning to balance my relationship between technology and nature. It's easier said than done. I practiced logging out of social media during the school week, only to overbinge it on the weekends. I woke up early to watch the sunrise, only to go home and spend the extra hours online. Each moment I found myself in this cycle, I had to take a step back and ask myself how my life was benefiting from my actions. Don't mistake my point as just put your phone down an hour earlier before bed, or go on a hike once a week. Instead, the harmony of the two together, finding the intersection and where they mold your life. Asking yourself the question, do I control my phone, or does my phone control me? It starts with the little things. Letting your eyes take a break from the screen glare and breathe in the fresh air. Switching out the ping of your cell phone to hear the birds chirp. Taking a moment to reflect on how this boost of serotonin is far more impactful than those quick hits of dopamine you get from doom scrolling on social media. Releasing yourself from the chains of technology and instead letting yourself run wild and free in the beautiful valleys and hills that surround us will truly open your eyes to the pinnacle and realness of life, with better relationships and a better you. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley, for sharing your story on the convergence between the crossroad of technology and finding yourself through nature. Nature without technology is a way to clear one's mind and be able to discover the little things in life. With this said, AJ will be speaking about how his relationship with his disabled sister grounded him and helped reshape how he approached the subtleties in his experiences. Please join me in welcoming Senior AJ Griffin.
Little brother, do you want to play Barbies with me? Shelby, my 22-year-old sister, asked while watching Disney Junior. Now, my usual response is always a yes, unless, of course, I have mounds of homework to finish, to which I then reply, maybe another time. I find it ironic that Shelby calls me her little brother because I've always felt like her big brother. See, Shelby has a severe developmental disability, and her brain functions around a toddler level. She is physically unable to care for herself. She cannot get dressed, brush her teeth, make food, or use the toilet unassisted. This is my life. We're a family of 4 that lives in a 2-story home with a pool out back. Today, for the most part, I would describe us as a united and happy family. I say for the most part because my parents are still raising one typically functioning teenager that's now an adult, I guess, along with his 22-year-old sister with disabilities. It is a continual and evolving process where we still face our share of challenges, but it's much more manageable than it used to be. The combination of me growing and maturing into my own self, along with my parents learning how to manage so many things at once, has smoothed things over. But it wasn't always this way. My family used to live in a near constant state of stress and chaos. My sister and I, when I were younger, used to fight a lot, like all siblings do. Whether we didn't want to share food or sit next to each other in the car, there was always something we were upset with. And my sister's disability that I didn't fully understand at that age only intensified our bickering. If I'm being quite honest, I don't believe I will ever fully understand her disability because it is such a complex thing. There is no simple statement that can be used to describe what she has. So we learn as we go. And while it's a common belief that the home should be a place to rest, relax, and unwind from a tough day at work or school, this wasn't how I grew up. My home was a stressful place, and to escape it, I used outdoor activity and organized sports. My favorite pastime was going to a local park and playing in the grass, finding sticks on the ground and building things out of them. And then at the age of 4, I started my journey with organized sports. The first was baseball, and since then I've played so many different sports, it's hard to remember them all, from volleyball to swimming to a multitude of others. My point is that I use sports to experience some normalcy in my life. When I stepped out on the court or the field, whether it was for a practice or a game, it gave me the chance to forget about all the things going on back at home and to just be a kid. My parents soon realized that this outlet wasn't enough for me. And when I was 7 years old, our family reached a breaking point. The scales of attention were constantly shifted in favor of my sister, and as a result, I felt left behind and in the shadows. I began to distance myself from my family. When my parents would ask me how my day was, my only response was a simple, okay, with no further detail or dialogue. Because I was given the metaphorical backseat to my sister, I eventually decided subconsciously that I needed to stay back there. At that young age, it was hard to decipher what the lack of attention I was receiving meant. And in my young brain, it translated to a lack of love. Fortunately, my parents were able to sense this divide growing between us, and they came up with a solution. After some very thorough research, my parents discovered a quaint little group home situated in a cul-de-sac right over by Cuesta Park. Now, when people hear the word group home, it sometimes makes them cringe. They picture a place where you ship someone off to because you don't want to care for them anymore, but this preconceived notion that all group homes are bad is not completely accurate. Sure, there are some bad apples out there, but my parents did the research, and they knew that this home would be a good place for all of us. Shelby would come home on weekends and summers, but while she was attending this special program at Mountain View High School, she would live at her alternate home. I still vividly remember driving up there on Friday nights to pick her up, and I could overhear the band play and the crowd cheer at St. Francis. Back then, I had no idea that the very school whose joyous cheers I could overhear from a mile away underneath the night sky would be the school I would attend one day. But it just goes to show that you never know where life will lead you, but it drops hints along the way if you're paying close enough attention. Nevertheless, the group home was the perfect place for Shelby to thrive. The program at Mountain View High School is the best program she's ever been in, with the best teacher she's ever had. Her teacher, Mr. Q, understood that just as people don't enjoy the same things in the same way, that developmentally and intellectually disabled individuals require special care. Their needs cannot be adequately met with a one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter program. They are all unique and have their own needs that have to be met in order to have the chance at living a happy and fulfilling life. Unfortunately, the group home, Green Pastures, has since closed due to a lack of funding and extraordinarily high costs to remain open, but it remains a key experience in my life. The time Shelby spent at the group home was crucial in keeping our family together. It gave us a chance to reset and figure out our next steps as a family. This decision was not taken lightly, but it was a necessary one that mutually benefited our entire family. What was hard for me as a child to comprehend was why things were this way. At that young age, I couldn't understand that Shelby had a disability that required a great deal of attention. All I knew in my little brain was that I didn't receive nearly as much as her. A little while back, I came across the term glass child. A glass child is a sibling of someone with a disability who is often seen right through or overlooked because the sole focus is on their brother or sister. What I now realize after those 11 years is that my sister simply required more care and attention than I did. And that's not to say I didn't deserve anything. All children need the appropriate care and attention in order to thrive. Simply, it's just a reality that all parents have to face. Balancing attention and care between multiple children is no easy task, and it's only made harder when one child inherently requires more because of their disability. Growing up as a sibling of someone with a disability has truly been a blessing in disguise. While we have had our tough moments, I have learned so much more from my sister, no offense, St. Francis, than any class in school could ever teach me. One of the biggest lessons to this day that Shelby has taught our family is about enjoying the little things in life. So often as humans, we are so focused on the future or the past that we fail to live in the present. Even when we do manage to live in the present, we have the tendency to focus on the big moments life brings us. Whether it's a high school graduation or a sports championship, these are the few moments that we can find ourselves actually living in the present. Sadly, we can neglect all the little moments along the way to these larger experiences. My sister has shown me through her own unique way that the little things matter. All the stops along the way to the larger achievements or experiences in life are important, no matter how small they may be. My sister's life is filled with lots of small moments of success and happiness simply because that is all she can experience. Her definition of success and happiness is drastically different from what you and I would define as success and happiness. She will never know what it feels like to interview for a job and then receive a phone call that you were selected for the position. Instead, she finds happiness in smaller things. The pure joy she exhibits when our dad wiggles a gummy worm and tosses it at her on road trips makes us all laugh. She attends the Smile Farm almost weekly, simply because she loves hanging out with the animals, especially her favorite bunny, Oscar. We continue to get up every Christmas morning at the crack of dawn to see what Santa brought all of us. Now, to most, this doesn't sound like much, but it brings her an immense amount of joy. And even though we may have different definitions of success and happiness, we can all embody Shelby's philosophy. Simplicity is bliss. Our lives are filled with small moments too, but we tend to ignore them in favor of the bigger experiences that come around every once in a while. Instead, we should try to live in the present and soak in all things life throws at us, good, bad, and ugly, because at the end of the day, we will feel so much better and learn so much more from taking everything in and truly appreciating it than just simply focusing on big moments or successes in life. Take the road less traveled on. Stay to watch that sunset. Pat yourself on the back for making your bed in the morning. Sit in those bleachers a little longer after that football game, because life moves by fast and it doesn't slow down for anybody. So enjoy all the little moments in life, because they're quite easy to miss. My sister has made me who I am, from what I see to what I say to how I act. She's a part of me. Because I grew up with a disabled sibling, I'm able to maintain my cool when life gets stressful. Shelby has also taught me to lead with kindness and compassion, and to find the joy in the little things. Every day with Shelby is a new learning experience that steadily continues to build and redefine who I am. And while one day I may have the privilege of receiving a congratulatory phone call, knowing the joy of a mere gummy worm to Shelby will make me relish the moment even more. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ, for inviting us to explore what being a brother has meant to you. Your unique and vulnerable insight will assuredly help us all reframe our perspectives on the importance of family. Now, as one of the director of speakers, I've had the privilege of working with our next speaker, who will be sharing her journey dealing with something that we often take for granted: hair. Compounded by her background, her experience with alopecia undoubtedly raises some thought-provoking questions on how we appreciate what we often overlook. Please join me in welcoming Junior Durga Murthy to the stage.
Raise your hand if you remember the 2020 Oscars with the Will Smith incident. Quite a few people. Now keep your hand up if you remember the year before that. Not so much recognition. What about the 2022 Oscars made it so memorable? For those of you that may have forgotten, during the 2022 Oscars, Will Smith slapped host Chris Rock in response to an offensive joke he made comparing his wife Jada Smith to a bald Navy SEAL. Will Smith undeniably acted on violent, unnecessary impulse, but we can't help but wonder what exactly aggravated him so much. Chris Rock's joke, although seemingly harmless, was based on lasting societal stigmas about bald women. He called Jada Smith G.I. Jane 2, implying her shaved head made her a militant-like, unapproachable woman, and thus unfeminine. Jada Smith has a disease called alopecia, an autoimmune disorder in which one's hair falls out with no guarantee of it ever growing back. Because of its autoimmune nature, there's no definitive cure for it. So that day, Jada chose to accept it and embrace it because it's a huge part of who she is. That disease became a huge part of who I was when I was 7 years old and my hair started rapidly falling out in large chunks, faster than I could really hide. I never really paid attention to the state of the frizzy mess on my head until it started falling out into my hands. I didn't tell anyone I was diagnosed with alopecia areata, a specific type of alopecia, because I was so ashamed of it. It became quickly obvious to my close friends that with my chunky headbands, unwavering aversion to updos, and refusal to let anyone touch it, that something was wrong. Like many, I assumed balding was for much older women or for cancer patients, and at that point in my life, I had never actually seen another bald girl. All the movies I watched featured bald women as the feared, dangerous characters, like in Black Panther or in G.I. Jane. They were never the love interests or the princesses, and were constantly defeminized for their hair or lack of it, and these ideas were only reinforced by my South Asian upbringing. Every summer, my family would migrate back to India for countless reunions, weddings, and to check up on our relatives. Everywhere we went, the street vendors peddled fragrant jasmine, claiming it would accentuate our thick and dark hair. My Indian side is deeply rooted in the maintenance of hair and its link to prosperity and to success. Dating all the way back to my infant days when my grandmother would sit on the front porch and massage coconut oil into my roots. She claimed it would make my frizzy, tangled hair smooth and sleek, like the Pantene models I was so mesmerized by. Their hair was always perfectly blowing in the wind, trying to convince me that if I bought this shampoo, I would be just as perfect. Obviously, the glowing skin and the long legs weren't achieved via a shower, but that was the marketing of it. Their whole brand was based on the premise that beautiful hair would make your entire life better. and we believed it. I was dragged around the world trying gag-inducing Ayurvedic treatments, enduring painful hours of acupuncture, and even entertaining a bland, gluten-free diet for months on end. Everywhere we went, everyone had something to say. The nosy aunties and my hairstylists constantly gossiped to my mother of lore and possible home remedies to fix my hair, as if something was seriously wrong with me. I hated it, and I concluded the only way to combat that was to not let them say anything at all. So I hid, like any embarrassed teenager would. I pretended if I simply ignored the problem long enough, it would just go away. Meanwhile, my unaffected twin sister flaunted her newly dyed red hair, while I was forbidden from the toxicity of hair dye. It was so unfair. My entire family, including the large extended Indian family I have, prayed that I would be divinely healed to fit society's standards. Inevitably, when a few of my close friends found out about my alopecia, they were initially shocked. But I kept hearing them say things like, "You're so lucky you don't have to shave, or wax, or pluck your eyebrows," which, ironically, I was drawing on every morning instead. Or do all the other things women are expected to do to even be considered presentable. Why did men lack this pressure? I was appalled when I realized how in our society, many men are largely apathetic or unaware of their hair as a result of not being judged for it. That double standard drives women's disproportionate insecurity of not meeting beauty standards. I now realize the numerous resources supposedly created to help with my balding were simply disguised opportunities for companies to capitalize off the insecurities they created. We buy into social stigmas out of fear of being dubbed unprofessional or unattractive or rebellious, all terms commonly associated with bald women. But there's nothing chaining us to these terms, and my mother is a prime example of that. My strong-willed mother and father, upon learning of the untreatable nature of my alopecia, shaved their heads and sacrificed their hair in prayer and in solidarity. My dad's transformation was nothing I hadn't seen before. Like many, I had been quite desensitized to the image of bald men. But when I first saw my mother, I was shocked. This is the same woman that spent hundreds of dollars on extensive hair treatments to cover her early grays. But she shaved it all off to prove a point to me. And now I truly understand what that point is. There is no shame in individuality. My mother fully believed this and didn't let anything hinder her. She didn't yield to unprofessionality, to judgment, or even to personal vanity. She is a brave woman who confronted society's image of bald women with no hesitation to help shape mine. She sent me a message that day, one of indifference, one of confidence in herself, in her hair, and in the way she chose to show appreciation for something that had been socially stigmatized for so long. If I could send a message to myself during the peak of my alopecia, I would tell myself to go ahead and dye my hair that awful bright red color my mom hated, to cut bangs in the middle of the night like all of my impulsive friends were doing over FaceTime, and to tie my hair up during the mile because I didn't need something like hair in my face to make it any more insufferable than it already was. I would tell myself to be proud of and own the hair I had, not to be ashamed of the hair I didn't. People think hair is linear, forever in a cycle of growing and cutting. But it's more complex than that. I broke out of that cycle when the growing part of it suddenly stopped. I was presented with the possibility of it never growing back. And as part of human nature, we tend to focus on the things we don't have. It let me look through a lens of reflection, because with no guarantee of my hair ever growing back, I learned to appreciate its sporadic nature. The good hair days could never be so good in comparison without the bad ones. The nature of our hair can be applied to all aspects of our life in the sense that nothing is ever guaranteed, so we appreciate it and embrace it for what it is at the moment. Get that haircut you reluctantly turned down. Dye your hair that color you've been dreaming about and saving to your Pinterest boards. Take the risks you were too afraid to take yesterday, because you never know if that luxury to choose might slip through your fingertips and leave you empty-handed tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Durga, for teaching us all that it is important to try new things and take risks in our day-to-day lives. If we don't take action in our lives, opportunities will slip away and we can begin to struggle with our identity. At this time, we'll take our first 10-minute break. We invite you to get a snack, something to drink, and interact with our speakers in the lobby. There you will find notepads, and here we invite you to leave messages and comments for each of our speakers. As well, you can find 2 questions posted on the lobby's walls. We encourage you to write your thoughts and ideas on the post-it notes and share them by sticking them on the black paper. When we return, speakers Kyle Nguyen, Junior Anushka Roshan, Freshman Kiera Schultz, and Senior Hannah Cushing will share their story.
Welcome back, everyone, from our first short break. Please continue to show your support for our speakers here in the next block. Children throughout the world face many hardships that we sometimes turn a blind eye toward. So here to enlighten us on how to face these difficulties through the perspective of a growing man in today's society, please welcome Senior Cal Nguyen.
Back by a simple hello. He was unable to recognize who I was, which I later found out was due to the memory loss caused by his stroke. This unexpected circumstance made me think about how a relationship that developed over years could be in jeopardy all because of a single night. It wasn't until I risked losing one of the only role models I had in my life that I learned to appreciate what's right in front of me. During the time he was in the hospital, I made daily phone calls to him. One thing I did was remind him of all the fond memories we shared together in order to attempt to re-jog his memory. Simultaneously, I was reminded of these memories and realized that I took all of them for granted. It helped me learn to realize that I needed to devote my time to people who were with me rather than people who weren't there. Thankfully, he finally regained his memory after a few weeks, and after a few more weeks, he was able to return home. But while I saw this moment help me become a man, it turns out it was only the beginning. This new beginning starts with patience and devotion. From letting my mom know when the metformin supply runs out, to cutting in half the capsules of Triple XL, sorting my grandpa's medicine became one of the daily tasks I took up in order to care for him. Over time, I've grown to enjoy this task and still do it to this day. But it helped me, but I think of it as a way to pay my gratitude to someone I should have so long ago. Through service and vulnerability, I also learned that I need to define myself not by my manliness, but through my character. I didn't need to be strong. I didn't need to be confident. And I didn't need to know what to do all the time. I need to be a grandson who's willing to step up for his grandpa, a son who would be willing to do anything for his family, and most importantly, someone who can make my younger self proud. And for all of these requirements, I didn't need to be a man. I just need to be me. I've always envisioned what it would be like to see my dad in person, face to face with someone I've always thought about. Of course, I'd tell him of all the good friends I've made, how I'm so excited about graduating, and maybe slide in a quick question on how to get my mom to stop complaining about my sleep schedule. But when the time comes for us to both part ways, I think I'll be okay. I think that rather than define myself as a man, but through my character, I can take on the journey alone. Everyone here has been an emo, lost with no direction in sight. And whether we want it or not, sometimes the people like Marlon in our lives will not be there. So please, be grateful for them while you still can. And when it's time for you to make the journey in the deep blue all alone, just remember to keep swimming. Keep swimming outside the expectations society puts on you and live by your own standards. The world is blessed to experience just one you. So, show us what you got. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle, for showing us how understanding ourselves and our values, separate from societal pressures, while difficult, can be truly transformative to our self-views. Shame is an emotion common to most people. However, we rarely explore how it affects us over time. Our next speaker will discuss her personal experience with it from childhood and how she learned to move past it. Please join me in welcoming junior Anushka Roshan to the stage.
When I was in kindergarten, I had the monumental task of making an All About Me poster that was supposed to tell my class about who I was. In it, I had to talk about my favorite color, my dream vacation, and my family. But instead of feeling excited to share my story with the rest of my class, there was nothing I wanted more than to stay home that day. You see, I could find pictures to represent my favorite color and dream vacation, but I didn't have a single picture of me, my mom, and my dad all together, because when I was 2 years old, my parents got divorced. Now, how was I supposed to show up to school with an incomplete poster? How was I supposed to let the rest of my class know that my family wasn't like theirs? Sharing this fact about myself in my poster was daunting, to say the least. So, right now, you might be wondering what the big deal is. Yeah, my parents are divorced, but so are almost half of all Americans. The thing is, it's fundamentally different in my Indian community. Just to put it into perspective, the divorce rate for Indian Americans is about 6%, but about 40% for all Americans. And if people from my community do end up getting divorced, they're constantly made to feel like an outsider, because getting divorced means that you're a failure at keeping your family together. Growing up, I could almost feel the whispers, the judging stares of our community, and I could tell that my family felt it too. For example, if we visited my mom's side of the family in India, we would often say that my dad simply couldn't make it or that he had work, but we would never say the truth. As a child, seeing the adults in my life tiptoe around this very real aspect of ourselves made me feel like I had to do the same. I couldn't help but feel ashamed of my family and of myself from being so far from the mold of what the quintessential Indian family is supposed to look like. Like, I remember telling one of my friends that my parents were divorced and her being absolutely shocked because we were the first Indian family she had ever seen with divorced parents. Now, to be honest with you, I didn't think that my family was all that different until I started comparing my life to other people's. I didn't have one home like everyone else. I had two. And I didn't have one birthday party. I had one hosted by my mom and one hosted by my dad. These aspects of my life contrasted so deeply with everyone else around me that I couldn't help but feel that my family was broken because we were so different from everyone else around us. What I was experiencing right then was shame, which is defined as the humiliation caused by the conscious awareness that something about you or your situation is inherently wrong. And so, I found it more convenient to hide my family's truth and let people believe that I had the perfect family than accept it. I figured if it wasn't real to everyone else, it was easier for me to pretend my situation away. In my kindergartner brain, this was a foolproof plan. I mean, I'd lie about everything from not being able to host a sleepover because it meant having to explain which house it would be held at, to making up excuses about why my parents would come separately to every event. Now, as I'm sure you figured out, this plan wasn't that foolproof, because nearly every single conversation after that became anxiety-inducing, because I couldn't let this massive secret inside of me slip out. I was constantly terrified of getting caught in my lie. And just like that, I had let a simple fact about myself become one of my greatest weaknesses. Now, at this time, most of my shame just came from me being scared of what people would think if they found out. And then I started therapy, and that seemed to add almost an extra layer to my shame, because I felt like there must be something inherently wrong with me for me to need a therapist. Again, in my Indian community, mental health is also extremely stigmatized. And several people told me, "Why do you need a therapist? You're not crazy." Statements like that made me feel so small. And so I took to doing what I did best, lying. This time I'd lie about going to a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment instead of telling people where I was really going after school. But then I started middle school, and I honestly felt like I was the most mature person out there. I felt like I was finally ready to make friends, branch out, and invite people over. Now, obviously that brought with it some questions, like why my dad was never at home, or why I could only meet every other weekend. I found myself having to tell people the truth purely because of the confusion that it was causing them. But somehow, that didn't put an end to my shame. Here I had always thought that it was caused by my fear of other people finding out, so why didn't it end after I told them? As I talked to my therapist about it, I almost had a sort of epiphany. Here I was telling someone every detail of myself, every aspect of my life, whereas with family or friends, I had always hid myself away. I finally understood why I had never told them the truth. I was scared that they would see me as the outsider that I always thought I was and start treating me differently. I decided that it was finally time to just be open and stop lying to myself and to others. And so, as part of an assignment in my middle school speech class, I just got up and told my whole class the truth. Now, this might have seemed a little bit extreme, but it was what I needed to do in order to confront my feelings. To be honest with you, it was the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my entire life. I mean, picture this. You're standing in front of 30 people talking about something that you felt embarrassed about your entire life. And so, as I'm sure you can imagine, when I got up there, my hands were shaking, I was stuttering. It was awful. But as I kept talking, I honestly felt this wave of calm wash over me. As I looked out at my classmates' faces, I saw nobody was judging me. In fact, they seemed empathetic, caring about what I had to say. After that, I realized that I didn't need to be scared of what other people would think anymore. Nobody treated me differently after they found out about my parents' truth. I realized that I wasn't any different because of my supposedly non-traditional family. It was part of my identity in terms of shaping my perspective, but it didn't define me. In fact, choosing to be open rather than forcing myself to hide allowed me to change my entire perspective on shame. I mean, it's something that everyone here has felt for one reason or another. So how do we decide what deserves shame? As a child, I always felt shame about something that was completely out of my control. And now looking back, I understand that it wasn't something that deserved shame. Yeah, I came from a non-traditional household, not a two-parent household, but instead of feeling ashamed about that, I now feel nothing but pride, both in myself and in my parents. Instead of succumbing to our community standards, we created our own definition of what the perfect family looks like. When we're able to flip that switch in our minds, we can rethink our entire experience as an experience to grow rather than to hide. From not being able to talk about my parents' divorce in front of my closest friends, to now talking about it in front of all of you, I would say I've done some growing from that scared kindergartner that I used to be. Now, a lot of things aren't in our control, but what we do control is how we react to them. So next time, instead of framing something as shameful, let's try framing it as a growth experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Anushka, for vulnerably sharing your story and helping us understand how to reconsider and reclaim shame. Often, the hardest part is learning to be open and defining your own sense of self. Our next speaker experienced a similar journey when learning to reconcile her different identities and overcoming self-enforced stereotypes. Please welcome freshman Kiera Schultz to the stage.
Recently, I've been focusing on embracing my Chinese roots. So I did this in the way I knew how, by eating, because, who doesn't like food? It's food. One dish I tried that some of you may know about, hot pot, really stood out to me. I recommend trying it in a group because it's quite large, and trust me, I learned the hard way. Hot pot is essentially a soup base in which you add different ingredients and side dishes, such as meats and vegetables, coinciding into this amazing final product. Each ingredient blends into something new, but without knowing the specific items and what they're made of, you won't know how each contributes to the final pot. You have to understand every ingredient before knowing what the final product can be. I am a part of America's melting pot. I'm a first-generation Chinese American. Now, this may shock you because a lot of people think of the first generation as their grandparents who came to the U.S. for a better life. Clearly, I'm not a grandma, but I did come for a better life as a child. However, I didn't come with my biological mother. I'm an adopted child, and I came to America with my mom in 2009. We're not exactly sure where, but I was born somewhere around Fuzhou in southeastern China. At 21 months old, I came home for the first time. For me, my family means a lot. My mom is 100% Western European, and my dad is 50% Polish and 50% Belarusian, making my sister a combination of them. I am 100% Chinese. So when somebody sees my family, the only connection they make is between me and my mom. We're both pretty petite. But other than that, I don't look anything like the rest of my family. Nonetheless, a house is full of love, and a home is a home, no matter the composition of it. But I guess that's not how people see my family. The love may be clear in our eyes, but how people visually perceive us will always come first. I don't look the same. I'm the elephant in the room. Growing up, my parents really did try to give me an authentic Chinese experience. Because I was already 21 months old, I could speak a Chinese language, more specifically a language called Gan. My parents hoped I would keep the Chinese language I knew along with learning English. Unfortunately, I went far off that path and quickly lost my fluency. My parents tried to ensure that I kept the important parts of my culture. They hired a Chinese nanny who they thought was speaking to me in Gan, except I never spoke back. They celebrated Lunar New Year and played me Chinese videos, but it seemed that the older I got, the more I rejected my Chinese culture. And even when my parents sent me to Chinese school, I felt so out of place while being surrounded by people who look like me. Feeling different in an environment where you're all supposed to be the same, I lost more and more of my Asian identity. Throughout middle school, I surrounded myself with kids who looked like me. But I always felt like I didn't fit in. Not because of how we looked, but the differences in our family dynamics. In response to this dilemma, I modeled the way they lived their lives in hopes of fitting in. I didn't want to be that different kid. This resulted in me forcing myself to follow what is called the model minority standard of Asians. In simpler terms, the Asian stereotype. The main ideas are that Asian children should be smart, focused on becoming a doctor. Straight A's are all you'll see on a report card. Ivy League is the only league. And you have to play violin and piano. Now I realize that I placed the model minority standard onto myself. I followed the stereotype. I feared that any noticeable difference, that if I didn't get an A, if I didn't limit my freedom to match my friends, I would be exiled back into this place of loneliness and feeling misunderstood. I didn't want to be American. I couldn't be American. I could only be Asian. I could only be perfect. Now I'm in high school and I look back. The idea of others' opinions of me matter less because I know my identities are worth it to myself, worth it to my family. To start appreciating my culture more, I changed my lock screen in the morning to this little girl who stares up at the world with innocence. This little girl is me. And if I could ever go back and talk to her, I would say, you can be two things. You can be Asian, and you can be American. You can be both. Originally, I was really confused about the meaning and the process of combining cultures because I hadn't needed to acknowledge it until now. But I've grown to accept the idea through the concept of 1 + 2 = 3. The individual ones are important, but they also combine into making something unique. As a toddler, I got so caught up in the American side that I forgot my Chinese roots. And in middle school, I drained my focus on the Asian side and pretended not to have an American culture. But now I'm focusing on the combination of both. The idea of Asian plus American being brought together creates a hyphenated identity factor of Asian American. I consider these 3 different identity factors that all make up my culture and me as a person. To dig deeper, I developed my way of learning culture into something positive rather than negative. When I forced myself to follow the model minority standard rule for rule, I got so caught up in being perfect that I forgot the reason I was doing this was to help myself understand my culture. Now I choose to live my Asian American identity in the way I see fit, by incorporating culture into my life, not making my life the culture. No matter what culture you associate with, this idea applies to all people. Everyone is made up of a combination of identity factors. And sometimes we find certain identity factors shining brighter, which is commonly the label society will give you. But this label doesn't define you, nor mean that you are one-dimensional. Instead, you are who you want to be. And that's something you can define at your own pace. And once you know yourself, what other people think of you loses importance. That's the strength provided by having a variety of identity factors that ultimately combine into making something unique. This is the hot pot of life, and you have to let yourself discover all the ingredients before the soup is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiera, for sharing your story with us and making us question what identity really is. Our next speaker of the night will be talking about the joy of little detours and taking time for yourself. While for most of us the car is just a means for transportation, our next speaker will show us how it can be something more. She is someone I'm honored and proud to call a friend, and as much as I would like to go on and on about her, I have to get off the stage eventually, so please give a very loud round of applause for our next speaker, senior, Miss Hannah Cushing.
Buckle in, I'm going to take you on a ride. Allow me to set the scene. You're driving down the good old 101. It's pitch black, and there's one car about every 8 minutes. And, as an added bonus, there's construction work in the new carpool lane, making you unable to totally phase out because of the random traffic that bubbles up. It's only natural that your eyes start to get a little bit heavy, but you cannot sleep. So, I present to you my foolproof plan to stay awake. Air conditioning, crank it all the way up and blast the catchiest tunes you can think of. The most essential part of this plan is singing as loud as you possibly can. Through this method, I found the best way to use my time. And it's so simple that anyone can do it. You've probably heard of mindfulness as a form of meditation. Its most intriguing trait is that it's totally up to you to choose how to be mindful. You just have to let it help you. Practicing mindfulness is important because it gives you time to think about you, which I know sounds a little odd, but in reality, it creates better, more thoughtful, less reactive people. I mean, for me, it improved my mood, my relationships with others, and my mentality towards life. When I get in the car, it's like stepping into my own little world where I get to control everything. The 4 doors isolate me from the outside, and even though the windows are clear, I like to pretend that no one can really see through. It helps the judgment pass on the left. My sedan has become my oasis of freedom, making it the perfect place to practice mindfulness. With this thinking time, I've been able to assess myself, my day, my life, and sometimes that means thinking about nothing, which is okay too, because silence or being alone aren't things we should be afraid of, but rather embrace. For the longest time, I was petrified of being alone. It didn't matter where or what, I just always needed to be with someone. Part of growing up, though, means learning to be by yourself. And mindfulness taught me how to do that by getting comfortable talking with myself and learning to unhear that critical voice that usually accompanies me. To be honest, my most interesting conversations are probably the ones that I have with myself. I find my own points to be incredibly hilarious. Of course, being introspective is integral to becoming a better you. But once you forgo all of that thinking, you have easy access to a serotonin boost. I mentioned it earlier. It's part of my foolproof plan to stay awake. It's singing. So, crank up that radio, Bluetooth, do what you need to do to get some music on. Various studies have shown that singing leads to improvements in mood as well as relieve stress. It is literally the greatest dub of the century. Of course, there's the scientific chemicals in your brain explanation for why you feel so much better after you sing, but I like to believe that it's incredibly cathartic. There's nothing quite like pouring your emotions out into someone else's words. Thank you, Taylor Swift. When I'm in the car, it's like, whoa. It doesn't even matter how you sound. No one is there but you. It's the perfect place to release your pent-up emotions. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in the car, but because my parents were polar opposites when it came to driving, I had very different experiences. My mom was a very cautious driver. She followed the rules to the extreme, so that meant 65 and not a mile over. She was content with staying in the right lane, but you did not want to see her without her navigation. My dad, on the other hand, isn't a crazy or aggressive driver, but upon hitting the highway, he's in the fastest lane immediately. And I'm pretty sure he's one of those people that thinks along the train of thought of, oh, the speed limit is just a suggestion, but for legal reasons, I can't confirm. In true opposite fashion, he'd never ask for directions because he's got this. Their completely different driving styles influenced how I saw driving and eventually influenced how I drove. I got my mom's need for Apple Maps even when I know exactly where I'm going, and my dad's need for speed. But again, legal reasons, everybody. I am always going the speed of traffic. The car. As a kid, I never realized how much time and effort it took shuttling me from place to place. But now that I'm driving myself, it is quite apparent. Before I got my license, I only had time for two things: practicing softball and doing schoolwork. Even car rides between places didn't feel like breaks. My time was dedicated outwards, never inwards. It was exhausting. But it was during these long car rides that I discovered my dad's peculiar habit. He would have whole conversations, whole epics to himself, on mute. Allow me to demonstrate. Like that. At first, I thought this little observation was insignificant, until I started driving myself and started seeing the same peculiar trait in me. Being in the car with anyone for long periods of time can cause arguments and awkwardness, especially after a hard tournament. The car ride home was a tough struggle. But it was due to these tense moments that I quickly learned how to talk it out. the car became a space for me to talk about my feelings. And even now, when I'm alone, I converse with myself and feel a rush of comfort. Through these hours of introspection and self-Socratic, I learned the importance of reaching out. Evidently, I have a pretty good relationship with myself, but my relationships with others wasn't so great. I hardly check my email or respond to texts on time, and for a while, I didn't realize how this behavior was straining my relationships. I thought that the disconnect I felt from everyone was normal, and I never got a chance to reflect on that feeling. It took many, many hours in the car and conversing with myself to figure out that if I wanted to be closer to the people around me, I needed to reach out. And that meant going out and trying things, or making calls on my way home. Simple and small things that would promote open communication and better understanding. Even compared to even a year ago, if you ask any of my friends, I'm more open, more approachable even. And this hasn't happened overnight. It happened in the car. I'm still changing and trying my best to become better. And this is how mindfulness has helped me. It gave me the time to be alone with my thoughts and figure out that I needed to up my communication game. If there's anything you should take away from my talk tonight, it should be this. Find time that is yours. It could be car time, like me, or it could be shower time, running time, that space right before you go to bed. Just a time where you can think about what you're thinking and control your actions. It's a time where doing nothing is just as important as doing something. A reprieve from all the work. A detour, if you will. Because when we're intentional about our alone time, it allows us to take these little detours that help us find our way on the highway of life. Hope you guys had a great ride. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah, for taking us along your ride of discovering the importance of dedicating time to yourself for reflection and recovery. We will now be having a 10-minute break. Please join us in the lobby to talk to our wonderful speakers and leave personal messages for them. Then, tune back into Block 3 to overcome your existential crisis with sophomore Arav Santake, have a meaningful conversation with junior Krish Singani, and share some laughs with junior Neva Shirsaker.
Hi everyone, it's wonderful to see you again, and I hope you've been thoroughly enjoying the program so far. At moments in our lives, we are reminded of our own insignificance in the grand scheme of the universe. This realization can trigger an overwhelming sense of existential dread, causing us to question our place in this very world. Here to explain the nuances of finding hope and purpose in the infinite universe, please welcome to the stage sophomore Arav Santake.
Space and time. Space. The average height of a human being is 162 centimeters, or 5 feet 4 inches. In comparison, the diameter of the Earth is 1.3 billion centimeters, which is 7 million times wider. The Sun, a medium-mass star, is 859 million times wider, and the observable universe is 5.4 times 10 to the 26 times wider. Time. This line represents how long the universe has been here, and that tiny red dot is how long we've been here, for less than 0.002% of the universe's journey. Is it incomprehensible, the numbers that define us as a human race, how we occupy space and time? It's supposed to be. Our brains aren't built, or they're not even able to comprehend the grandeur of the universe to its fullest extent. It's humbling, but it's also comforting to know that both Timothy Chalamet and I can't comprehend the universe around us to its fullest entirety. These numbers may make you think that we, as humans, are somewhat astronomically insignificant. In fact, it's this awareness that separates us from the other residents of this planet. At some point in our lives, a wave of existential dread hits us and tells us that nothing we ever do relative to the scale of the universe will ever have any meaning. This feeling, known as nihilism, can be described as a sense of emptiness and a fear of the unknown. It's not unfamiliar to many ancient philosophers and modern-day thinkers alike, and it can be described as the awareness of one's own insignificance in the grand scheme of things. It's akin to existentialism, a branch of philosophy that ponders our purpose in this vast universe. These elements of doubt and reflection are what drive us as human beings to gaze at the stars and question our place in this vast cosmos. As Carl Sagan poetically put it, the cosmos is all that is, was, or ever will be. I agree with him, and after my freshman year of high school, I took a research internship position at UC Berkeley, studying the universe and all of its subtle, beautiful nuances and complexities. More specifically, anomalous binary star systems. However, my uncertainty about my place in the universe still lingered, like a whisper in the back of my head. I was put into a state of angst as I turned towards standard existentialist and nihilistic literature for any form of avail, which usually helps me in times of distress. Reading is a form of escape, after all. However, my quest started off as fruitless and bleak. I decided to read The Stranger by Albert Camus, a richly existential book that covers, well, the topic of existentialism and nihilism. However, it only worsened whatever was going on up here. Why didn't a book so reputable for dealing with this topic work for others and not work for me? Life is already tumultuous enough as a teenager, with the eternal desire for more sleep, acne, and a high school workload. But it's at this age when we're hit with questions like these that seem to have no definite answer at all. It wasn't until I sat down with Professor Robert Pierre Humbert, a visitor from Oxford, that I started to understand. When I asked him about the sense of astrophysical nihilism, he answered me with a hint of optimism, a perspective I'd never thought of before. It took me so long to realize that although we may just be insignificant specks floating around in the cosmos, we've accomplished so much. We've sent humans to the moon and back, and we've sent robots to Mars. We've been able to detect microwave radiation from the edges of what we think is the universe. And we're only getting smarter than our ancestors. So try to think of it as this. Look at the multitudes within yourself and see if you can find an answer then. There. Although you may seem like a tiny speck floating in the vast universe,
remember that that tiny speck has its own vast inner universe. Space and time. Space. You have more atoms within you than there are stars in the observable universe. And time. You live longer than so many other inhabitants of this planet. We even have the gift of consciousness to enjoy it. Might as well be grateful for it. What worked best for me, however, was seeing the world through the eyes of an aspiring astrophysicist. I started reading books by Neil deGrasse Tyson and Stephen Hawking, allowing me to see the world with a more scientific lens. And suddenly, the universe didn't seem so daunting anymore. Rather than an abyss of nothingness, it seemed like a realm of hope, with answers to the questions we ask. A place where we, as humans, have a place. We're as much of a part of the universe as the stars and the planets are, except we have the ability to unravel its intricacies and complexities and understand the full beauty of it, if we choose to. But my perspective may align with yours. However, it's the beauty of humanity that we each hold our own unique perspectives, see the world through a subjective lens, and find our own personal meaning in life's experiences. When I started to think about this sense of astrophysical nihilism, I turned towards reading The Stranger by Albert Camus. And that didn't work for me, because I saw the world through a scientific lens. That's what helped me the most. Everyone finds their own answers to the big questions in the places where they feel most at home. For a tennis player, it might be on the court. For a reader, it may be buried somewhere in the pages of Harry Potter. Finding the answers to the big and existentialist questions of life is a journey of self-discovery, a journey that requires patience, but a journey and a quest that helps us understand our own internal perspectives and leads us to where we belong. To find your own subjective purpose, to find your own unique purpose, it's important to ask the questions and find the answers that mean the most to you, to connect to the things in the world that mean the most to you. However, it's crucial to keep in mind what the most important piece of the puzzle is. The true growth is what happens in the journey along the way. The true growth occurs in the experiences. The process of finding your own answers may involve reading books or talking to others who have been through similar experiences. But, as I said earlier, remember what the most important piece to the puzzle is. Life isn't just a mystery. It's a reality to experience. Sure, the destination is an amazing experience to reach, but the journey itself is what makes life worthwhile, and the destination is simply a bonus. So as we ponder our place in this vast cosmos, I hope we can come to the realization that all of the atoms in our bodies were once forged in the heart of our stars, the stars in the sky, and that we're all connected to each other in ways that we may never fully understand, and that we're all made of stardust. So even though we may not find the end to the journey, it's the best thing in the universe to be on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Arav, for that incredible insight into how we can learn to find solace in the vastness of the universe. Discovering who we are meant to be can often truly best be found through our own organic experiences. Our next speaker has spent years understanding the relationship between his gender identity and ethnicity and how it has affected his relationship with society. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to the stage to Junior Krish Sangani.
It is 10 minutes before my sister's graduation, and I'm screaming at my parents who are desperately trying to find something for me to wear. At last, I give in and wear what my mother hands me. I look in the mirror, and all I can see is a little boy in a dress. I look stiff, and I feel like I'm suffocating. Now, don't get me wrong, it was an okay-looking dress, but it felt gross on me. Something felt off. All I wanted was to wear my button-down shirt. Why couldn't I? Well, surprisingly, the persistent screaming did end up working because I was able to wear my button down. But why did I have to fight so hard? I was assigned female at birth, but always felt like a boy. Unaware that I'd be expected to follow the concept of womanhood, I lived detached from reality and even my own body. As estrogen puberty took its course, I couldn't recognize myself anymore. And as I got older, the expectations for me to fit in became unbearable. So, I started wearing eyeliner and I let my hair down. I studied how my female friends would act. I put in all this work and effort to change myself, yet it only made me feel worse. I felt like I was doing drag, dressing up day to day as somebody else. I had no hope and saw no future for myself, yet I was getting the most compliments than ever in my entire life. Over time, I faced an unspeakable amount of adversity within myself and decided to come out to my Indian family. This task consisted of countless arguments over tears and anguish. You see, traditional cultural and societal norms in India never recognized or accepted the concept of being LGBT. Therefore, it was even harder for my parents to understand what I was going through. My father once told me about one of the distant relatives he had back in the day who was a trans woman. He told me about how awfully his relatives spoke of and treated her. It hit me about how far behind India is compared to the US on LGBT issues. In fact, even to this day, same-sex marriage isn't legalized in India. Despite all this, my parents made it their number one priority to be there for me. They knew that I was struggling and that I needed help. So I got a gender therapist to help me feel more comfortable in my own skin. After months of education from countless doctors and therapists about being trans, my parents agreed to start calling me Krish instead of the more feminine name I had previously. When challenges came my way, I persisted, because I couldn't see myself as anything other than a boy, and I was going to make it my mission to live as such. Since starting my transition at the start of the new school year, I have faced challenges that I could not have even imagined before. The simple task of going to the restroom was met with anxiety and concern over which one I should go into in order to minimize others' discomfort with me being there. I constantly felt like I'd never be able to fit in with other guys and that my androgynous or gender-neutral appearance would scare them away. This is when it hit me how much looks play a role in one's treatment in society. I wished I looked older. I wished I was born a cis male. I wished I was taller. Yet again, I wish I could just fit in. There was a point in time when I felt cursed. My gender dysphoria, the disconnect between my mind and my body, got worse to the point where I'd feel dizzy or nauseous when I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. In a way, my gender dysphoria was shattering my relationship with God. A place as sacred as the temple felt like torture to go to. I would see countless cis Indian guys with masculine builds and be reminded of a future I thought I would never get to have. I would envy their privilege of being able to walk around and not feel uncomfortable or trapped in their own body. This jealousy became so strong that I even started to question why God created me this way. The only thing that freed me from this daunting feeling was changing my mindset. I started to view my body as a vessel that would provide for me for the rest of my life. I started focusing on the things that I have that I'm grateful for instead of beating myself up for the things that I don't. While I struggled with my relationship with God, my mom only became more religious. You see, religion was such an essential part of her childhood, and it really helped her come to terms with me being trans. One day, when walking back from a local Indian store, a couple of Hindu devotees came up to us with religious pamphlets. They handed my mother a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, but she refused to accept it, saying she already had one at home. One of the devotees then pointed towards me and said something along the lines of, "Take it. At least he will read it." As soon as we got back in the car, my mother burst into tears. I had no clue why until she pointed out that he gendered me correctly. My mother said that it was a sign from God and that it relieved her from all the worries she had about my transition. This was the first time that I passed as a guy in public. It's crazy how something so insignificant, something that many take for granted in their day-to-day lives, felt like the world to me. It was moments like these that made me have faith in my future. The little things, such as going to the gym with my dad or being invited to guys' night out, that made me feel supported and confident. Along my journey, I figured I needed to find some people that I could look up to. I remember when I was younger watching a documentary about the first trans bodybuilder in India named Aryan Pasha. In fact, his videos helped me describe what I was feeling to my parents, especially coming from the same cultural background. So I decided to reach out to him over Instagram, not expecting much, but was surprised to see that he actually responded. I ended up having multiple conversations with him online, and he truly inspired me. You see, at the beginning of one's transition, there were so many doubts, so much uncertainty, that even the littlest bit of representation can help a lot. So, I started reaching out to as many people as possible to create a community that I so desperately needed. You know, I spent a good chunk of my life trying to fit in. I didn't realize that by surrounding myself with supportive people, I can be my most authentic self with no fear of judgment. So, if you are going through something, anything, talk to someone, and just take it one step at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Krish, for sharing your personal story of embracing the different aspects of your identity and finding community. Sharing similar experiences, whether it's key memories or small anecdotes, can be a great way of strengthening communities. Our next speaker will share her own stories and research on laughter and how and why it can bring us together. Please join me in welcoming junior Neva to the stage.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl. This little girl really wanted to paint her nails. So, naturally, this little girl went into her mom's walk-in closet to snoop around and look for nail polish. This little girl was me. As I dug past the piles and piles of my mom's clothes and jewelry, I finally found the box that I was looking for. But there was another box blocking it. As I looked a little closer at the second, smaller box, I noticed that it said, in large, fancy gold lettering, single malt Scotch whiskey. Now, initially, I was very confused because my mom doesn't really like to drink alcohol that much. But then, my confusion slowly started to turn into excitement. In my mind, I was thinking, oh my God, my mom is so cool. She has a secret stash of whiskey hidden in her walk-in closet. She really does have a life. In my excitement, I grabbed the box and sprinted across the house, slamming it down on the kitchen counter next to where my mom was sitting. Putting on my best 9-year-old interrogation face, I puffed out my chest, looked her dead in the eye, and demanded that she tell me why on earth this box was in her closet. My mom, as calm as ever, looked at me with the most blank expression on her face and slowly started to open the box. So you see, in my excitement-induced haze, I never actually opened the box to see what was inside. So when my mom opened it, instead of a golden bottle of whiskey like I was expecting, was just a bunch of bracelets and jewelry. Disappointment shot through me like an arrow straight through my heart. Recently, one of my aunts came to visit my family after losing a close family member. I wanted to cheer her up, so I told her this story. As she heard what was inside the box, she laughed, and wiping her eyes, thanked me for telling her the story. Later that night, I went to bed in pure amazement that simply telling my aunt a funny story was able to cheer her up so quickly and so effectively. This led me to wonder, what exactly is laughter? And what does it do in our brains that allows us to make us so happy, even when we are sad? Well, first I thought about what laughter is to me. I am a part of my school's improv comedy team, so laughter already plays a large role in my life. Improv comedy is a form of unscripted comedy that is made up completely on the spot, much like seen in the popular TV show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? So to me, laughter is a way for me to de-stress, to have fun, and to connect with my community through improv shows and performances. But I realize that not everybody has the opportunity to go to improv practice 2 times a week, and that you likely view laughter a little bit differently than I do. You might think of laughter as something that occurs once in a blue moon due to busy lifestyles, children, or work. Or that laughter only occurs when you're with certain people, or if you're in a certain place. But the truth is, humans don't need to do much to laugh. In fact, the easiest way to laugh is to be around a large group of people. According to CNN, humans are actually 30 times more likely to laugh when they're in a group setting. It's why some popular TV shows, like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Full House, often use laugh tracks because people feel more comfortable laughing with others around them. As a matter of fact, every single human being on the earth has the ability to laugh. From babies to 100-year-old men, from language to language, from the seeing to the blind, and from the deaf to the hearing. Everyone laughs. So, by now you must be wondering, why on earth is laughter so universal? And why do humans laugh? But most importantly, what on earth is laughter? Well, laughter wasn't always what we know it to be now. Right off the bat, you might think of a good chuckle at your coworker's joke, or a muffled giggle as you see a kid fall flat on his face. But did you know that laughter was actually a way for monkeys to bond with each other? The sound of laughter itself likely evolved from deep breathing patterns that occurred when primates would play with one another, and was even used to signal safety within their group. Laughter is directly tied to how we feel, and we only laugh when aroused in a positive, happy way, just like how we cry when we are sad or how we shout when we are angry. The English actor and comedian John Cleese perfectly described the function of laughter in this quote: "Laughter connects you with people. It's almost impossible to maintain any kind of distance or any sense of social hierarchy when you're simply howling with laughter." While laughter may have changed over the years to keep up with human evolution, some things have remained the same. Laughter brings people together, strengthens social bonds, and even reduces stress. So, now that we know where laughter comes from, let's talk about why humans laugh. There's been much controversy over the years on what exactly causes laughter, but scientists and researchers alike have narrowed it down to just 3 simple theories. The first theory, called the superiority theory, states that people reflect on their superiority by laughing at the misfortunes of others. For example, last semester, my physics teacher assigned my class a project: to build a bridge that could hold up 40 pounds of weight made entirely out of pasta. Naturally, because my best friend was my partner, we waited until the last possible weekend to begin building our bridge. Just as I arrived home, after 4 grueling hours of hard work, I get a call from her, saying that her grandpa, who, by the way, is a Harvard engineer, sat on our pasta bridge and broke it. Okay, yeah, I caught all of you guys laughing at the misfortunes of lowly high school students. Not cool, not cool. But the second theory of why we laugh is called the relief theory, the incongruity theory. This theory states that laughter is a reaction to the violation of expectations, nonsense, unexpected events, or irrelevant events. For example, if I just started speaking like Mort from Madagascar, "I love you, King Julian! Can I kiss your feet, King Julian?" I'd say that you all would find that pretty funny. I bet none of you expected to hear an accurate imitation of Mort during a TEDx talk. And the last and the final theory of why we laugh is called the relief theory. This theory states that laughter is a way for us to release negative tension that is no longer needed in the body, especially if the laughter is about taboo topics such as death or sex. This theory explains why some people, especially preteen boys, find poop jokes so funny. Therefore, laughter releases us from the rigidity and the complexity of our daily lives. We suspend our familiar, rational concerns that lead us to negative emotions and instead allow ourselves to enjoy the humor of the moment. So, when we do laugh in these situations, what is going on inside of our brains that makes us feel so good? Well, the process begins in the frontal lobe of our brains, located just behind the forehead. This is where the brain decides if something is funny or not, and is where your brain decided that my Mort voice was funny. Once something is determined funny, the limbic system kicks in, and this is the part of our brain that controls feelings like pleasure and fear. Once something is determined pleasurable, the limbic system activates the motor cortex, which contracts and releases the lungs to create the ha, ha, ha sound we have all come to recognize as laughter. But perhaps the most magical part about this process is when the brain releases endorphins, chemicals that create positive emotions in the entire body and brain. Over time, the production of endorphins and the act of laughter itself actually has the ability to suppress cortisol, the hormone that creates stress. A well-timed joke has the ability to cut tension between two people, to prevent aggressive reactions, and even calm down two very stressed teenage girls trying to fix a broken pasta bridge the night before it's due. Laughter is the basis for all human connection. Laughter bridges every single human being to one another, from an infant's first breath to an old man's last. All throughout life, we turn to laughter as a means of comfort and joy. From congregating to watch SNL, to listening to your dad's stupid jokes, or to watching YouTube videos of epic fails, laughter brings people small sips of happiness every single day. So, when you feel like all hope is lost, or even if you just need to pick me up, turn to methods that will bring you a simple but impactful laugh. Thank you.
Thank you, Neva, for sharing your journey with laughter and its significance with all of us. It is important for us to step back and appreciate the little moments in life and to embrace them with laughter. At this time, we will be having our last 10-minute break, in which you can talk to our speakers from this block in the lobby. Please feel free to grab a snack and refreshments, and we encourage you to leave a note for our speakers in their designated boxes. Afterwards, we will be hearing from our next group of speakers and our final one, Junior Casper Halevy, Junior Julie Bortoletto, and Junior Eva Vignati.
Welcome back, everyone, to our final group of speakers for the evening. Although we're nearing the end of our program, I can assure you that these next few speakers have stories and ideas that are definitely worth reflecting on. For many of us, games hold a special place in the memories we have of our childhoods, but they're also an opportunity to break down barriers that we didn't know existed. Our next speaker will be exploring the world of chess not only as a form of entertainment, but also as a vessel for introspection and passion. Please join me in welcoming junior Casper Halevy to the stage.
A few years ago, I watched The Queen's Gambit with my dad. As I followed along, I started developing what you could call a chess superiority complex. I'd been playing chess somewhat competitively for nearly a decade now, so I felt that it was my duty to lecture my dad on everything from the similarities between Beth and Bobby Fischer to the technicalities of that final queen sacrifice against Borgov. And for some reason, my ability to articulately recite information from a chess database gave me the epiphany that maybe I have the potential for a career in chess. From the looks of the series, all that was left to do was to take a few shots and conquer the competition. Unfortunately, I went from shooting for the likes of Beth Harmon to getting steamrolled by the likes of Glistening Hippopotamus 123 online within the next half hour. Over the years, though, I've realized that you don't have to be the next prodigy for chess to be a meaningful activity. In fact, there are about 30 times more possible chess positions than atoms in the observable universe. So while you're not going to run out of options, you also probably won't become a grandmaster. But there's much more to chess than pointless memorization and the social ineptitude that comes with it. Without ever having to get close to the grandmaster level, chess can change the way you think and even be good for your social life. Let's start with the more sensible idea here that chess players are nerds, so that's probably doing something good for their brains. I started my chess journey at a co-curricular Chinese chess program in kindergarten. Being a goofy and aloof kid whose primary interests were watching the garbage trucks in the morning and airplanes taking off, there was an enormous wall between me and anything intellectually stimulating. Let's call the other side of this barrier the brain gym. Now, this wall seemed insurmountable for two main reasons. First, I physically wasn't able to climb it because of my lack of cognitive development. Words, numbers, common sense, and an overall societal compass, not my thing quite yet. Second, it was hard to be motivated to go to the brain gym. It required lots of effort for a little human sapling like me and was not fun or entertaining. That's enough to get high schoolers to hate something, much less a small child like I was. On the other hand, Chinese chess was fun because it was a game. For all I knew, the pieces looked cool, I could play with anyone I wanted, I could win, and hey, I could throw a rook at anyone I didn't like. This really easy-to-grasp framework of Chinese chess also allowed little me to perform relatively advanced cerebral activities. I had to associate pieces with movements, evaluate whether I had an advantage or was in danger, recognize patterns, find the best course of action, you name it. Chinese chess became a ladder for me to climb over that wall to the brain gym with no knowledge membership fee needed to be paid. Most importantly, I was going to the brain gym without knowing or feeling like I was going there because I was doing what 5-year-olds do best, having fun playing a game. Now, this all sounds great anecdotally, but let's get a little more specific with what someone as young as 5 is supposedly doing in the brain gym. Something intuitive that chess helps with is memory. And similar to the other things that chess hones, memory isn't something that can be directly taught or learned from a textbook like history or calculus. It's not really a subject, so you have to find activities to practice it in order to improve. As I transitioned to international chess in elementary school, my memory was put to work. Unlike typical classes where my peers and I often cram study for the next test and forget everything afterward, I couldn't afford to do that in chess. if I just magically forget the variations of all of the openings I ever learned or how to defend a particular endgame, long story short, I'd get destroyed. Playing chess forces you to constantly recall the information you once learned. To illustrate this, a researcher established a chess program at a local school in Pennsylvania for 6th graders, none of whom had any prior experience playing chess. And even so, just 9 months later, the kids who played regularly scored significantly higher on memory assessments. Creativity is another skill that is hard to directly teach. Many of my friends and I often pull the classic, "Oh, I suck at drawing," or "I'm not a creative guy" excuse whenever we face any assignment that requires an ounce of creative expression. When I was in art class back in elementary school, I was that kid who drew the universal house of unoriginality with the same colors and the same shapes every single class. As I played more and more chess, however, I began to realize that I couldn't pull that uncreative excuse anymore. My favorite opening from back in the day was called the Italian game, which goes something like this. I used to play this every single time I had the white pieces, no matter the circumstance. As I got older, though, my opponents started taking me out of prep by hitting me with the French, the Scandinavian, the Sicilian, and occasionally the not-so-glistening hippopotamus defense. I noticed that even if I internalized all of the main ideas of each of the thousands of different types of openings, after the first 5, 10, 15 moves, I was going to have to think on my feet and develop positional ideas on my own for the rest of the game. This explains why researchers found that even preschoolers who regularly played demonstrated a significantly higher creative capacity than their non-chess playing peers. As my chess career continued, my willingness to try new things in art class increased as well. I progressed from the Italian in the house to the Catalan and abstract art. This pattern of chess teaching the unteachable skills applies to critical thinking, problem solving, concentration, endurance, impulse control, and much, much more. So, it's clear that chess does wonders for the brain at a low cost and in a fun way. Nerds nerding out ought to be good for intellectual purposes, but the word social and the word chess aren't typically compatible, right? But just as chess tears down intellectual barriers, social barriers, believe it or not, come down with them as well. As one example, my late grandpa was 80 years old when I began learning Chinese chess in kindergarten. He was delighted to know that I was picking the game up because everyone else in the family was too lazy to. We each had a playing partner now. And despite the huge age difference, his declining health and hearing, and my undeveloped communication skills, the game we shared was enough to make those barriers vanish. We talked about everyday things together, laughed together, complained about my parents, of course, and bonded on a deeper level overall. And interestingly, there is evidence that I'm not trying to give you a Bernie Madoff pitch on the non-existent social benefits of chess. A group of researchers found that similar brain parts are activated when considering a chess position and when considering a scenario that would elicit empathy. Chess players, regardless of skill level, are always taught to think about what their opponents want to do next. Why did they play that move? What's their plan? What do they think that I'm thinking of playing next? We constantly have to put ourselves in the other's shoes, which happens to be the classic definition of empathy. And that's just the tip of the social iceberg. Another group of researchers found that because chess players are trained to analyze and learn from the mistakes they made in previous games, chess-playing kids of various ages demonstrated a significantly higher ability to cope with difficult social situations. These same children also became more sociable, confident, well-behaved, and even enjoyed studying more than during the beginning of the academic year. Now, I'm not going to act like I'm the exemplar of chess-induced social prowess, especially considering that it took me until junior year to finally get the guts to bring my passion for chess to high school. By this year, I was so desperate to start nerding out that I did some nerd hunting, found a couple of like-minded peers, and YOLO'd it by launching the St. Francis Chess Club. And as fine chess players do, we began calculating variations, possibilities, of everything that could go wrong trying to promote a board game club in the 21st century. But we missed the line where about 30 people, from close friends to strangers, would show up to the first meeting and be fully invested into their games while sharing some laughs from beginning to end, which is exactly what happened. That is the power of chess. Fundamentally, at its core, it's still a game. It's meant to be enjoyable, to be played with others, and to instill a sense of community. And it's easier than ever to start. You can buy a chess set that lasts for life for less than $20, or create an online account for free and start playing right away. You're not proposed to have any specialized knowledge nor be in a particular social group to play. As a matter of fact, in the previous studies I mentioned and in the broader chess research literature, chess players, whether rich or poor, Texan or South African, youngster or old fart, all reaped similar benefits. They and we have unlocked a way to tear down intellectual and social barriers while having a good time playing a game. Most importantly, though, when you find yourself procrastinating because of TV, social media, video games, or whatever it is, if you just replace it with chess, maybe you can feel better about yourself, knowing that you weren't completely wasting your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Casper, for sharing with us your passion for chess and an exploration of the benefits it can bring us. The fun and seemingly small actions in life, such as playing a game, can be powerful mediums for us to find community and grow as individuals. More than just a final win or loss, our experiences are what reveal new opportunities. Our next speaker will talk about her journey learning how to appreciate the process through gymnastics and modeling. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Junior Julie Bordolato, to the stage.
When I tell people I'm a gymnast, I sometimes hear the words, "Gymnastics isn't a sport." And while I could argue the opposite, the qualitative judgment of gymnast performances seems to be the basis for this conviction. With no objective measurement of goals scored, distance traveled, or time lapse, gymnasts are subjectively judged for the quality of their routines in that moment against textbook execution. Like diving, figure skating, all-star cheer, and others, it is a performance sport. Since my first competitive meet, I've grown a heightened understanding of the quality of the image I presented, down to the details. The position of my hands, pointed toes, and of course, a stuck landing. In particular, the balance beam has taught me the importance of image. Though I may feel nervous, to the judges I had to appear calm and fake it till I make it, keeping my shoulders back and chin lifted as if I was performing on the floor and not an apparatus only 4 inches wide. After all, it was that routine that mattered, not the countless ones I'd done in practice. But in order to hit this routine, every component needed to be executed well, fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. I know most of us swore we never used geometry outside of math class, but I beg to differ. Imagine the components of a beam routine: acrobatic series, leap, jump, turn, dismount. But these pieces, perfectly shaped to complete the circle, are not an accurate representation of my actual abilities. Rather, even my best efforts may look like this, occasionally wavering off balance. Nonetheless, I needed to maintain that image of confidence, hiding and disguising any wobbles with improvised choreography. Pretending everything is going perfectly as planned is essential in these faltering moments to ensure the judges only saw your best. My awareness of the image I presented extended beyond gymnastics when I signed with a modeling agency during my sophomore year. Like gymnastics, modeling is qualitative and even more focused on image. It was the shot that mattered,
not the hundreds of other images. Creating the perfect photo, in theory, could look like this. The lighting, hair and makeup, my pose and styling all captured in a precise moment, then fine-tuned later in post-production. But when I stepped off that set, that version of myself on camera seemed distant, almost unreal. However, the urge to portray the model off-duty, like Bella Hadid and many others did, remained ever near. Because who wouldn't want to appear effortlessly put together all the time? Though that routine and that photograph were small pieces of my image, I sought to broaden the scope of their perfected nature to other parts of my life, from test scores to my everyday appearance. In the end, it wasn't the hours spent studying that were being graded. The final number on the paper was the important one. And it wasn't the number of drafts that mattered, but the final talk that counted. And how many of you have ever said, "I'm doing good," when good was only somewhere you wanted to be? My efforts to expand those refined parts of my life led to this illusionment. The emphasis placed on the final result disregarded the majority of my time spent as a work in progress. I soon realized this was perfectionism. The Oxford Dictionary defines perfectionism as the mindset claiming that perfection is attainable and should be attained. I'm sure you've all felt this to some extent, worrying about work, school, or other ambitions and goals. This mindset essentially created the dissonance between being and appearing, much like the phrase, "fake it till you make it." In other words, putting on a facade of perfection, although it had yet to be attained. Fake it till you make it, in theory, could aid in achieving the elusive goal through emulating that success. But why fake it? Why hide the work in progress? Why strive to present the image of success prematurely? Competing, especially on being, taught me to do this, to let the judges see a confident routine even though I may not feel like it. Modeling instilled a similar mindset. After all, the final photo is what gets seen, not the behind-the-scenes moments. And while this makes sense in performative activities like these, real life isn't a performance. The final routine, resume, or photograph were only the tip of the iceberg, mere snapshots of the culmination of work done to create them. However appealing, striving to maintain that topmost image from start to finish was limiting. Because though I may have an idea of what my final goal was, there was no way to know if I truly made it. In striving to appear perfect, I limited myself to my own idea of the perfect end, the top of the pyramid. Fortunately, I learned other things from gymnastics, like flexibility, mentally, and of course, physically. I would love to demonstrate for you all right now, but these pants are a little limiting. Letting go of the rigidity and superficiality of appearing a certain way, whether on paper, in person, or online, allowed for the authentic experience of simply being. Being present just the way I was. Being okay with the steps forwards, the steps back, and maybe even sideways. Being patient with the process. Embracing this flexibility, I shifted my attention away from that expected goal and towards the current moment in the journey, wherever it may lead. Instead of focusing on emulating the final result, I focused on putting in the actual work, practices, notes, test shots, and appreciating their importance in enabling growth. In honoring the process, I found value in the authentic journey, the one with the unknown destination. Thank you.
(2017) 6th grade.
a pivotal time in any person's development of their own self-expression. From ages 1 to 2, you learn the basics of survival: talking, walking, the meanings of no and more. 4 to 5, you begin the educational experience. But the aspect of who you think you are doesn't really breach the surface of your consciousness until about 6th grade. At this age, you are finally aware of your presence in this world. Things that used to be so simple now have a plethora of complicated meanings. Homophones are a constant reality for you, where a yes replaces a complicated version of no. When I was in 6th grade, complexity meant that compliments weren't just compliments depending on the way that they were said. I remember distinctly when I realized that boys looked at me in a certain way. I had always heard from my family and loved ones, "Watch out for the boys, they only want one thing." And up until that point, I thought that that was silly. Why did one of my friends look at me funny? Why did one of my friends hitting my butt suddenly feel wrong? As children, we are not fully aware of our actions nor our feelings. Although it is only 1 grade higher, the social shift from 5th to 6th is a vast leap. I didn't comprehend the way in which I could be perceived by other people. I had grown 3 inches that summer, standing tall at about 5'1", with my hair and skin freshly kissed by summer's warm air. You can say in modern terms, I was feeling myself. Me and my friends were walking along the streets of our downtown when we received looks from random strangers around us. Even though we were not directly catching them staring at us, we could feel their eyes watching our every move. The amygdala is activated when others are watching us, even if we have not looked back yet. The sympathetic nervous system pumps adrenaline and cortisol through you, heightening your senses and making you more on edge when walking alone. The feeling of being watched is a 6th sense experience. Intuition makes your whole body itch as if you're being swarmed with red, hot fire ants. It sends chills down your spine and your consciousness. As we made our way down the streets, I felt eyes on me, piercing into the back of my skull. I turned and saw a man with a crooked grin, whose eyes definitely did not display kindness or innocence. I immediately turned back around. Shame overtook me. I didn't say anything to my mom for fear that she wouldn't let me walk around alone with my friends anymore. And frankly, I didn't want to express the shame that I had felt in that moment for fear it would become real. This nameless feeling felt foreign and therefore opened doors to thoughts and anxieties I couldn't quite wrap my head around. In order to eliminate the possibility of being sexualized and objectified, the media often tells us that we must cater ourselves to the public to stop this from happening. The thoughts that first swirled through my mind were, this is just what women are forced to endure. This is what being a woman is. Now, we must learn to shape our femininity and our presence in this world to cater to others. I couldn't bear handling the weight of this theory on my own, leading me to finally open up to my mom about the way that I was feeling. She explained to me that I cannot change my body, that it is a vessel which carries my beating heart and soul, that it makes me physically who I am, but it is not everything. And the most important parts about me had nothing to do with how long my hair was, the shape I had begun to grow, and the features of my face. But what happens when that reminder disappears? What happens when you don't have someone who completely understands? Someone with knowledge that is available to you when it counts. Fast forward to 2019. My mom passed away to stage 4 sarcoma cancer when I was just 13 years old. In her absence left a gap, seemingly the size of the universe. I felt as if a giant wave was crashing down onto me, and my ideas of what it meant to be a woman and embrace my femininity swept away with it. At 13, I felt as if I had to fill the shoes my mom left behind in the house. And living with 2 boys who tried to understand, I felt alone, because understandably, they never could. My readily available supply of knowledge for how to be myself and how to feel comfortable within my identity as a woman was limited. What my female family and friends tried to do, I will forever be grateful for. But there are holes that can never be filled, and aren't meant to be. When I started high school in 2020, this hole grew. I watched my friends have support from their mothers that I didn't have. It became so hard to breathe in a space where I constantly craved what I could never get back. I felt suffocated, but I was unable to ask for help, unable to look for support. My burden felt like one too heavy for anyone else to help me carry. And I let that core belief consume me. As negative reactions came as a consequence to my own actions, I began to loathe the woman I was becoming. I changed myself until I could no longer recognize the person that I was. The lessons my mother taught me felt like a dark, stormy cloud looming over my consciousness. My perception of what it meant to be a woman made me sick to my stomach. This shame filled my cup to the brink of flooding. I didn't know how to be modest and poised in the ways I was taught women should be. I mimicked what I saw around me, but the thing I failed to realize was that no one knows what femininity really is. No one knows the right way to be a woman. Because here's the thing, there is no right way to be a woman. Femininity comes from within, a realization I experienced after stepping into my womanhood without that key mother figure. Applicable to most aspects of life, mindset and quality of life are exactly what you decide them to be. They can be anything you imagine them. It doesn't really matter what others' versions of femininity are, as long as you are comfortable within your own version. Your perspective is uniquely your own, and it is valuable to this world and your individuality. In attempting to uncover my faults, I realized the true meaning of what my mom was trying to teach me. It was not to strive to be a better woman, yet a better version of myself. She was teaching me to love myself as I am, with all my faults and differences. It didn't matter what I felt I had shortcomings on. After this realization, the experiences I went through, like going on a first date, dressing myself for events, feeling heartbroken or used, didn't make my hole feel wider. Instead, that hole grew flowers. It needs sunshine and rain and air and a perplexed system of other things to formulate life. Each flower was a lesson that I had learned for myself, by myself, something that I could keep to myself or share with others to help them flourish their own flowers too. The truth is, this hole will never go away, and it can never be filled. But with this whole, you are open to a possibility of a unique perspective. Although it's tragic to have to go through these things without someone who completely understands, the lessons you learn and grow from make you the people that you are. And that person is worthy of the love and respect every human deserves. Not striving to be perfect, but the best versions of yourselves for no one other than your own pot of flowers. Because quite frankly, it doesn't matter if you have another ray of sunshine or a cloud of rain. You alone can blossom to your fullest potential too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva, for showing us how femininity and our identity is determined by yourself alone. There is no one right way to be a woman.
This marks the end of the program, but we want to thank everyone who has made this event possible starting last May. Please welcome back all of our speakers and board members back to the stage.
We would like to thank Mr. Thompson and our amazing tech team, our wonderful photographers, and Ms. Treplow for her support with the glass room. We would also like to thank TEDx alums Philip Gu, Sarah Fazioli, and Ava Gumas, who's here tonight helping backstage, for their support in all the stages of this process. Last but certainly not least, we'd like to thank our incredible moderator, Mrs. Leslie Shortle, and invite her to the stage. We have something for you. All the hugs.
All the hugs. Hugs.
And now we'd like to pose for a photo. Okay, do you like sorority girl? Yeah, let's do it. What are we looking at? Okay, we're good.
Before we leave, we want to take a moment to reflect on what this evening has meant.
We hope that after listening to all the talks, you leave here today with a new perspective, a heightened understanding of a particular topic, or simply an inspiration. Take some time to consider how you can apply the messages from tonight to your own life.
How can you also set out on a journey like the ones our speakers have shared tonight? How can you also find the people and passions that help you along the way? As many of our speakers reflected in their talks, the process to determine your own truths are just as important as the truths themselves. And a world where we learn to rely on each other is a pretty good one. Let your values guide you in determining what matters to you and what meaning you want to create in this world. Thank you for joining us this evening and have a wonderful night. We'll see you next year.